up, everybody? Hey, so this isn't an official BABC Bad Old Book Club, but it's kind of a spin-off. So we're going to take this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and we're just going to wrestle with some of the core ideas from it, namely defining or wrestling with his definition of racist and anti-racist. And then I think that'll take us the length of this conversation. So if you guys could just introduce yourselves really quickly.
Absolutely. My name is Tyler, and I'm a recovering Oklahoman. I was told not to say that, but here we are.
Yeah.
Ladies first.
Oh, what a gentleman.
Gentleman over
Really
here.
nice. My name is Gracyn. I'm 18. That's all.
I'm not giving that age.
I don't know.
I am Taylor.
I am Zach.
Lord Benjamin Nathaniel Redic II.
And that's true.
Say that 5 times fast.
You're still Tyler. All right. You went first. We don't have a book called How to Be an Anti-Sexist. So
Okay.
maybe that's next episode. All right. Hey, so just to kick this off a little bit, I thought it was important to, again, address the fact that we're not going to cover everything in this conversation. We really do just want to show up authentically and have honest conversation. And so this is us. This is where we're at in our journey right now. I know I've been learning and listening a lot over the last couple of weeks and wrestling with how I fully show up and the idea or the culture that I was raised in. And so I show up with a little bit of bias in one way or another. And then sometimes the opposite. Like sometimes you grow up in a culture and then you see something wrong with it, so you just show up in the totally opposite way. So I'm kind of finding the wisdom and the balance in between. Yeah. So I thought it'd be best if we just kicked off by looking at a couple of my grandparents' Facebook statuses.
There we go.
And then we'll just rate them. How racist is this post?
Dear Aunt Sue.
Kidding. But I want to ask you guys a question to kick off. And the question is this. Okay, think back 5 years. Do you feel like you are more racist or less racist than you were 5 years ago? You were 13.
I was 13,
so,
yeah.
But that's the biggest transition, though. I mean,
That's what I'm saying.
You don't have to go back that far. Yeah, that's
I was
real.
a tween. That's a
And
big deal.
You could even think forward 5
Yeah.
years, which is a cool thought. I'll
Oh.
be dead in 5 years. Okay, so are you more racist or less racist? And then kind of how did this happen? I want to know what that thing was.
Wait,
Did something happen, or was it conscious, or was it, you know?
So kick us off. Give us an example. Are you as racist as you were 5 years ago?
Am I as... No. I mean... I don't know, like, how do you rate it in degrees? Like, I am blank degrees less racist, but
I want to know what your
17%
answer was.
less
5
racist.
years ago, yeah, I felt like I was a justice warrior. I also realized I just had no clue what was going on. I wasn't wrestling with these ideas or these thoughts at all. And I think even a part of that is just my privilege. I didn't have to. I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to think about it. I realized even 2 weeks ago, all the riots, protests, everything's going down. Like, people are marching and standing for justice. And I am power washing my sidewalk on cloud 9 in suburban America.
Yeah.
And so I enter into this from a place of comfort. So I recognize that.
Oh,
Your
that's
turn.
real.
You came from Oklahoma. You can only be less racist.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
mean, that's true. Recovering Oklahoman. And if you're from Oklahoma, I don't truly mean that. There's a lot of great people there. But you know what? My small hometown, back when I was a little kid, it was an old sign. The place was shut down in the middle of our town. Coffee Cup Cafe. It wasn't spelled with
Nope.
C's. Yeah, it's like that stuff is
Yeah.
prevalent. That stuff is real. And even though the place was shut down and they eventually took that sign down as well,
Yeah.
it's like this is a place of there's not a lot of diversity where I came from. So when I'd say less 5 years ago, but like 10 years ago, entering from small town Oklahoma to Austin, where I get to meet people, see people, and just get all these experiences that were just not even around. Otherwise, all I had was hearsay and what racist people had to say around me. It's like,
Sure.
and I get to actually meet like, oh wait, I get to humanize everyone.
Yeah.
So I'd say I would hope less, but I'm also learning what a deep ocean that is to kind of wade into and realize.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
it's
kind of like
thick.
the more you learn, the more you realize, like, I
How
don't have
much
any
you
of this
don't
figured
know.
out.
Yeah.
So the Coffee Cup Cafe.
So bad.
That's
Well,
not just because they can't spell in Oklahoma.
poor choice.
I'm just saying, as far as
Equally.
racism is concerned, that was a good move. Like, that was cute.
Yeah.
Way to be creative.
Good marketing on the racists.
Boom.
All right, who's next? More or less. If you haven't answered, then it's probably more.
Okay, no. Oh, no. No. I was 13, right? So
Yeah.
it's probably, I don't want to say I was, I would say I was more racist at that time just because nobody taught me the PG terms for things, like how to describe, you know what I mean? Like I would describe people as they were. You can't exactly go around saying like the brown teacher. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I was just very innocent in the way I talked about people. But I'm definitely less racist now. Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, you weren't
Nice.
even
That's
supposed
good.
to be on this podcast. You're like, oh, but I read that book.
Yeah.
So you were active.
Okay, exactly.
You're
That's
on
real.
it and you're killing it as an 18-year-old. I wish I was
Yes.
in your seat when
Thank
I was
you.
18.
Thank you. That's
All
very
right.
kind.
So next up, the brown podcaster.
Yeah, boom.
No,
There it
you
is.
can't say that. You can't say.
I was innocent too.
Well, they're
We all were at some
Are you more or less racist as you were 5 minutes ago?
Yeah.
The goal is 5 minutes at a
More.
time.
More is,
Absolutely it
progress.
is.
We're looking for
Yeah, there we go.
Progress. Yes.
I don't really think I've changed in the last 5 years. Probably because I'm black. I'm more aware of
Oh yeah.
the levels of tomfoolery that exist in current, like today, but I don't think I personally am more or less racist than I was. I am more active. I have seen that there's more that we could be doing as individuals and as a country to combat some of this stuff that's going on, but I don't think I personally feel more or less racist.
Okay.
I think you saying more aware is a really good way to put that, though, because I mean, I think that
Yeah.
is a massive step into it. It's not just about awareness, action and everything has to follow suit, but like that awareness it's a massive difference between someone doing something out of ignorance and someone doing something willfully.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's one of my takeaways from this book, though, is inaction is action. And so moving
Yeah.
to a place
Yeah.
of action.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's one left.
Yeah. I'm definitely less racist than I was 5 years ago. I would like to think 5 years ago I wasn't racist and I'm even more not racist.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a similar hometown, not in Oklahoma, but in Missouri, where very small, there was, I think we have 10,000 people in the town and less than 100 were black. So
Wow.
very, very small
That's rough.
black population. Yes. But interestingly, growing up, I always really liked anyone that wasn't white because I rarely saw people that weren't white. And so like growing up in high school was always the person who I dated people of a lot of different races.
Fantastic.
And I didn't think about it really unless my
kind of
family
progress our country needs.
unless
Thanks for playing
people
your
brought it
part.
up. Yeah. But then going into college, I was confronted with like, whenever I became friends with Black and Puerto Rican people who I like loved and adored, that was when I was more confronted with like, okay, I do have internalized stuff that needs to be addressed because like I have an assumption in my head of what I think your hometown looks like, and then I go to your hometown and it's like you have a nicer house than my house, and like your family is amazing, and like just the ways that that I realized, okay, I have more to work on than I would have liked to admit going into college. And now I would say it's gone further. Like maybe it started out of I'm empathetic towards my friends and I love them so much and I want to understand their worldview. And now it's like it goes beyond my friends. Now it's just I love these types of people. I love people that are different from me, and I want to understand what their experience is like and do what I can to make things better.
I think one of the things you said that's critical in any conversation like this is proximity.
Yeah.
So many of the biases, I don't really like the word racism and all, are preconceived notions of people in other cultures. A lot of those things derive from lack of proximity. Once you start getting around people, you realize that people are just people.
Yeah.
You stop being, you stop having those preconceived notions. You have something to actually attach
Absolutely.
to that culture or those people or whatever.
Well, that's the thing the book keeps on hitting on again is no one individual represents a whole people group.
Yes.
Like in any way. I mean, of course, this talks about racism a lot, and I think it even debunked like racism even being a very valid way to group people at all. But like no one person represents everyone, just like no people group represents just that one person, that they have to be that stereotype.
Yes.
You know, that's a huge thing. And honestly, yeah, that's all you, when you're not exposed, you don't have anything else to work with except for what your racist uncle told you. So it's like, why wouldn't you believe it?
Absolutely.
Because you trust him.
Yeah.
You know, he's been good to you, you know, and so.
Dang it, Uncle Jeb.
Yeah, I know. You're leading me astray.
Isn't it wild? Like, I mean, you don't even recognize it, but just learn behaviors and family dynamics.
Absolutely.
Like,
You don't know what you don't know.
It's a thing.
start to walk out. We go to the big city from wherever we were.
Yeah.
I mean, mine was Bulverde Spring. It wasn't any different. Like, the joke was we had 3 black kids and they didn't know they were black. And we just didn't have any experience. We had no idea what we were dumb.
Yeah.
Dumb. And then we walk and we start to build these relationships with people.
Yeah.
And it starts to challenge it. It's like unmasking, you know, like
Yeah.
the veil to take it off my eyes. And it feels like our nation right now is being unmasked.
Yes.
And we're having to wrestle with a lot of hurt and brokenness individually and systemic. Like, it goes back for a long
Yeah.
time. So let's wrestle. I think a good place to start is defining racism. So in the book, I like how he talks about racism, and you guys could give me your thoughts. Like, do you agree or disagree? So he says racism is a marriage of racist policies and racist ideas that produce and normalize racial inequality. So policies and ideas, let's kind of break those down.
Yeah.
Now, racial inequality happens when 2 or more racial groups aren't on equal footing. A racist policy is any measure that produces this racial inequality. And then kind of goes into racial discrimination as an immediate and visible manifestation of these policies. So I think a lot of times the way that we define, or I've defined racism, is racial discrimination.
Yeah.
But he
Yeah.
defines it as something that's more systemic, something
Yeah.
that is policy.
It's got a negative connotation to it by nature.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
And so then he also brings up the term anti-racism, which is anything that doesn't reinforce these ideas or these policies. That's a lot.
That's
That's
a
his
lot.
definition, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's his definition. I mean, I've always been of the mind that racism is a belief system that one race is superior to other races.
It is. It is.
And it runs in any direction, is regardless of power, etc. Because power in any situation can switch hands. So I never really attached it to policy. I'm not sure I can really get with that.
Yeah.
I feel like when you work that hard to define things, it could either make it easier to tear it down, but it can also make it way more complex, and you could see it everywhere. Like a standardized test, for instance. If you say we're going to go, kids have to score this, whatever score to get into this school or something of that nature. Well, if you argue that because of slavery this year and moving forward, these kids are disenfranchised, and because of that, blah, 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 they're not smart enough to take that test and get in, so that policy is racist. I'm like, well, no, maybe the policy isn't racist. Maybe we need to do something to address the inequality in the education system the kids are getting, but that's different from that policy itself being racist.
It might show other areas of that, that are at fault, but it's not inherently.
It could just be
in itself.
ignorance.
What if,
Yes.
what if like that test was a waypoint to get access to some sort of power, like higher, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a standard that people were saying has to
Yeah.
exist in order to maybe be a doctor. I don't think that's a racist thing. I think we need to, you don't fix that standard. You don't lower the requirements of other people for a standard. You bring people up to the standard.
I agree
So
with that.
Yeah.
I understand why it would be problematic in that moment when someone comes up against that barrier, but like, are you going to sacrifice your health and safety so people can feel good and be able to get degrees that maybe they haven't really earned?
That just reveals
I'm
the
not-
underlying
I'm not-
issues. Yeah.
Yeah, let's fix the underlying issue. Let's get to it.
Yes.
That's my stance.
So I think it's interesting on this one because, going through this book and thinking about this more, it's so complex. There's so many layers to it all, and it's hard to pick it all and piece it all into, especially like what most people are doing on Facebook, where they just like take one piece, isolate it, and say it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Everyone's so uneducated. Here's this one line to end the conversation. And especially when you get into policy stuff, because you look at like some of these like old timey laws that were incredibly racist
They
and
were
like
straight
just
racist.
it's horrible.
Yeah.
And so now it is worth looking into some of these things and looking like, hey, is there nuances of that happening? For the agenda. 'Cause
Sure.
politics are politics. They have agenda by nature.
Yep.
And but not picking them apart so deep to where you're searching and trying to impose racism on things that are at least weren't initially intended.
Yeah, it's about intent.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
I have a thought. So I think they talked about this in the book maybe, about how our school systems, for example, are designed where they get their money based off of the property taxes of the area.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what typically can happen is that lower income areas, there's a lot of renting happening, not a lot of home ownership. There's not as much property taxes being collected, and so the schools have less funding, and therefore the schools become unaccredited. That I lived in a suburb of Kansas City, and all of the high schools in that suburb were unaccredited. So every student would graduate 12th grade, and then they would have to go take the
GED or
the GED.
No way.
Yes,
Wow.
because the school was unaccredited because they
Oh.
didn't have enough funding.
Yeah.
And so I think that that to me is an example of a policy that is rooted in racism, because it shouldn't be that how rich your area is determines the quality of the education that your students are getting. Because
Sure,
I can't help
sure.
it if my parents are poor and I have to go to the poor school.
Sure.
And I think it does affect minority populations in a bigger degree than it affects white populations, because white populations may have the opportunity to go, okay, we're going to move out of this poor school district and into this rich school district, and we'll cut $1,000 off of our boating fund and put it towards our property taxes, and that's worth it to us for you to have a good education. Well, not everyone has that opportunity.
And we might have placed them on that side of the highway. Like we might have placed them. in the-
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So-
Absolutely.
On the other end of that, though, is that also, this is why it becomes dicey. The assumption you just gave assumes that white kids all have money.
Yeah.
I grew up way more privileged than my wife that she's white. She grew up in the boonies. I grew up middle class.
Yeah.
My family's always had money, two car and houses, etc. So even when we have these conversations, this is why looking at race as monolithic is difficult.
Yeah.
You two have a different background than Zach probably has, as far as economically speaking, or yourself.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of people who were raised with boats and I'm going to take some money from our yacht club membership to do X, Y, Z. There's plenty of people who grew up in places that they have jacked up educational systems too.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that education is important, but again, I'm trying to stay out of the political side of
Of
this.
course.
For sure.
But
Of course.
I have a very strong couple of opinions that are important here. You shouldn't be having children if you don't have the ability to take care of them. I don't care what
Yeah,
color you are.
Yeah.
If you can't give your child education, if you can't give your a decent education because of where you live at, if you can't feed your child, you probably shouldn't be having kids. You probably have some other priorities to focus in on at the moment. So I've never said that it's the school's responsibility to educate anybody. They should, because we pay taxes and everything for it.
Yeah.
But in the gap of them being terrible at their job, because government often is, your parents are supposed to step in.
Yeah.
Like my mom made me watch movies on African exceptionalism.
Yeah.
And when my
Yeah.
math scores were low, my mom made me do work at
Absolutely.
home. I did summer school
Yeah.
As it
at
should be.
home. So while there are things that we should change, this is why they had the bus vouchers and school choice and all those things as options. There is a lot more that we can do to fill in those gaps ourselves, and I think it's dangerous to say that the government has to fix that in that situation. We do need to be a little more self-reliant, I think, in relation to that. I don't know if I would say that policy is necessarily intended to be racist. It might be.
I guess I have like this view that all policies are intended to be racist in some way.
Well, when I
Yeah,
think about
to
the
a
people,
Like
degree.
anti-government.
Yeah.
when I
To a
think about the
degree.
people setting the
Yeah.
policies,
Right.
Yeah.
then I can make that assumption. So would we say can we not all policies are racist,
Yeah.
but there are policies that are racist?
Plenty.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that, I mean, maybe the core issue isn't your color in those suburban neighborhoods, but the fact that you're in an under-resourced community.
Oh.
Or
Yeah.
maybe there were policies that made it possible or made it more difficult for mom to show up or to tutor
Yes.
or to get access
Yes.
to the
That
same
is
resources that other students would have.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
gotta
Let's
label
talk
it.
about
Okay.
another racist policy. Who has seen the documentary 13th?
Oh, I saw it.
Okay, so in the documentary, they talk about how the war on drugs that was happening was the 80s, 90s. So
Opioid addiction.
white men
Clinton.
were
Yeah.
doing cocaine.
Yeah.
Black people were doing crack. It was the exact same drug. And the punishment was substantially higher for people who were doing crack cocaine. And that was a racist policy. And that's what built our prison system the way that it is. I mean, mass incarceration is a huge issue. There are people that are in jail for the rest of their life, no opportunity for parole, for like smuggling a pound of whatever. And it's like, that's to me, that's
absolutely.
not worth the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that is, in my opinion, was a way that the government used as an opportunity to lock up a lot of people that they didn't want on the streets.
Make money.
And we
Absolutely.
could
Yeah,
talk
make money.
for-profit
Oh.
prisons
Yeah.
on another
Oh, no,
episode.
yeah. That's a whole other
That's a
thing.
deep one.
Real.
Yes.
That's a deep one.
And it also targeted long-haired socialist hippies. So I feel-
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, it was a very
feel
flawed.
personally
That's
attacked
different
is what
people
you're
have done.
saying?
Yeah.
All right, so we've covered schools and education. We covered
Yeah.
prisons.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's next?
Let's go around.
And then I was thinking about the kids, right? And I think of that documentary, Idiocracy,
Oh,
where
yeah,
like dumb
yeah.
people reproduce at
Yes.
crazy rates.
They do, though.
Okay, so policy, neighborhoods, and I do think, I mean, to your point, like, yeah, it's not just a black thing or a white thing. Like, you can't place it all on one group.
Yeah.
Because I love that he hit on the idea that, like, genetically we're all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, like, that nobody's wired to be different
Yeah.
genetically. And so
That's actually weird because he does say something. I might be skipping ahead. Where he talks about culture, and he says that, well, you know, black people's style and the food and all that stuff is our internal culture being expressed, even though we're in a white normalized society. So if you give us your language, we're gonna put our spin on it, basically. So I'm curious. I mean, when he's saying we're all the same, like sometimes it feels like he isn't saying that we're all the same.
That's
He
where
is, he
the
is.
complexity of it. No, go for it.
No, you go.
I mean, like, because you've got this weird, because every human has this. You have your family lineage, you have your culture, you have your background, you have your subcultures around you, you've got your genetic makeup. Because even though as a humanity is all pretty much the same in that, individuals are pretty different from one another. And that is very, very, like, that does not have to do with racial lines at all. Like, the guy next to you that you grew up with or the guy on the other side of the world could be very different or very much the same as you. So you kind of bring all this together, make a human, and then you put a bunch of people with like-minded pasts, like experiences, then yeah, you've got, you know, this culture that comes out in just various ways, you know, because people want to belong. You know, you are not, even though you are yourself.
pack creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
going to bring that with you. We want to have pride. We want to,
Yeah.
you know, show what we represent.
Yeah.
And that's going to come out. So even if you're unique, you want to be part of a group. If that makes any sense. It's like
No,
you're still
it
going to bring
does.
that out.
It does.
We're gonna get tattoos and gauges like everybody
That's
else.
right.
Hey, we got
Yeah, I
gauges
kinda
together.
That's
want
fair.
Okay, so yeah, the idea that reminds
good.
me of his idea of assimilation, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of the ways that you can show up racist is I want to make you better. I want to make you like me. Like I'm the standard. Like I figured
Yes.
this out.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times it's just kind of where we operate from as people. But
Yeah.
okay, one thing that I want to wrestle with as we kind of type a quick episode is the idea that in order to have equality, we have to treat people differently.
Yeah.
Should we do agree or disagree? Hands up.
Oh, we can. We could do that.
That's a tough.
on,
Yeah. That's
on
just,
three, like however high you raise your hand is how much you
How much
agree.
you
because the
agree.
vernacular of that is just very specific.
Yeah.
It is.
Leaves no room for gray area. You
And
know.
I'll expound on it a little bit. He talks about like the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is future discrimination.
So it's kind of like fighting fire with fire, sort of.
A little bit.
Is that like affirmative action or
That would
I
fall
forget.
under that for sure.
It's
All right,
just
so
so
there we
hard.
go.
Raise your
That's what
hand
I'm
if
saying.
you agree.
To an extent. To an extent. If that's a thing.
Okay.
What is that? What kind of
Right there.
hand raise is that?
This is
Oh,
50-50. This is 50-50.
like
Okay.
Hamlet.
It's
It's,
like,
it's
why?
a gray area.
Boom.
It's raised. I'll count it.
Yeah.
All right, and now why?
Well, the
Explain
reason
yourself.
I would say because I feel like
How do you go from this to this?
the reason I would say that is because as we're seeing now, there are people who were probably straight up, flat out racist, who kept their mouths shut because it wasn't okay to do any of that, and they didn't feel the pot was stirred. Now that the pot's stirring, they're more racist than they were probably like 20, 30 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And like,
Getting
so
defensive, it's like an animal in the corner.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so on one end, I can see how you might be able to address the balance by
Yes,
doing things like
yes.
affirmative action, etc. On the other end, nobody really wants to be the diversity hire and know you're the diversity hire. So that's
Exactly,
not
yeah.
necessarily fun. And by having diversity hires, if you don't perform, basically you're making every one of us look bad. And you're creating
So you're representing
animosity in the world for people who are not as good,
Yeah.
if that happens to
Yeah.
be the case. Now, if you go in there and you smash, that's a very different idea.
Exactly.
But I can see people becoming more agitated because they're like, oh, they're just hiring people because they're black. Look at my uncle
Yeah.
Jason. He got
Yeah.
discriminated because
Yeah.
they didn't
Yeah.
have,
But that's
because he's
even
white
that
and
is
he
like
is
a
the
part
best
of the
this-
group
that's-
thing, right?
Yeah.
Like
No,
Uncle
yeah.
Jason represents all of these people.
So I can see the pro and the con in it. And so that's why I can say I'm undecided.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Because I think that if we start this idea that we need to treat people differently to make us equal, that's a whole nother path you can go down. Like, I'm not saying it's not right. I'm
It's the
just
same
saying,
path.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
the-
That's what we're
you
going down
just
right now.
reintroduced
Yes,
it and said,
it's
but it's
just a
okay
different
when we do
form.
it.
So-
And it might be good. It might
Yeah,
end
yeah,
well. I don't know how it's
yeah.
going to end, but I can just see how it sounds bad.
Because we're teaching people to treat other people a certain
Differently.
way based on
Yeah.
their skin color. Is that not racism? You know what I'm saying?
I don't think that's racism.
Okay, but
No,
it's
no,
a
no, but
STEM.
I wanna
It's
hear
definitely a
this.
STEM.
Okay.
Based off the definition,
Yeah.
it could be racial discrimination, but if
Yes,
it produces
yes.
justice and equality,
So it's a double-edged
Man.
sword there, you know?
Okay, so this is what I think. The quote from the book, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but he says, if we like imagine that there is a race, there's somebody who's been in shackles for however many years, and we release them from the shackles and we say,
Yes.
all right, get in line, it's time to go race.
Yes.
They're not going to perform at the same ability as the people that have been stretching and warming up
a
for
race
the last,
like a run.
like
Yeah.
a run.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I know.
The human race.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's how
That's
I
a fair
think
point,
we need
yeah.
to be viewing this is like it's not about like okay now we need to like be really feeling sorry about the fact that we had racism and slavery and all of this stuff. So now we're going to push black people to the very front and no white people can succeed anymore. And
Yeah.
it's not even going to be based on performance. It's just going to be based on the fact that they're black. I don't think that's what the point is. The point is there have been a lot of missed opportunities. There have been a lot of people that were more qualified, more educated, and they didn't get the opportunity because of the color of their skin. And so it's important that we as businesses, as schools, as a society make space to go, okay, we can't go back and change the fact that slavery happened, but we can make some adjustments to where we can make more room at the table for all races.
Yeah.
And if that means that maybe the black person we're hiring is slightly less qualified than the white person we're hiring, but we want more black people on our team because we need that diverse voice, then I think that's okay. Because maybe they have a slightly lesser degree or slightly worse grades with the same degree, but they're bringing a totally different viewpoint on life and on the world because they're a different race on a lot of like what we're seeing right now with all these companies who are saying this is our percentage of black people, Hispanics, and white people on our like boards. Like I think it's important that they're saying, okay, we want to make space for more people of
Absolutely.
color.
That is good. I bet the question, I'll give you an example why I say it's dangerous. What percentage of grades do they have to have? Do that be 90% as good as other white people? 85%? What about 70?
Yeah.
What about 60? What if the dude's absolute trash at his job?
Yeah. It's on
Is
a
it-
clear line.
And this is
But we
what
need numbers.
this is what I'm saying. What you're saying is
Yeah.
that's absolutely accurate.
Yes.
Because I've heard the
Yes.
race thing. We talk about that all the time. It's like, well, it's kind of jacked up to have people in slavery for hundreds of years and then say, oh, you're free and not do any kind of rehab. That was
Yeah.
a trash move. And then when we tried to do things and move our people forward, you burned things down. And you didn't like our businesses, so you set those on fire. That's really jammed up. One of the things about that I think is important to also bring up in this conversation is that we didn't need white people to save us to do those things. We just need you to move out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Preach. Yeah.
so that isn't to say that there aren't things to address. It's saying that I think that these conversations sometimes paint us as bigger victims than we are, Like
Yeah.
we're capable, ambitious, motivated individuals. And I think if you move out of the way, if you move the obstructions out of the way, they'll make magic happen. That's what
Yeah.
America's about.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fix this. I don't know if it's free college for people. I don't know if it's 2-year degrees. I don't know if it's, I do think some part of affirmative action is necessary. Like if we live in a place and it's 20% black and there's no one in the business, maybe in the upper echelons that's black, I'm looking at that like, what's the problem here? Like, there's no women at the top. How's that possible?
Yeah.
50% of the women.
Right. Yeah.
So there's room for it. I just think about like how does this? When does it end?
Yeah.
What is what is the goal?
Yes.
Like how do we know we're done? It's not well defined. So just to say we're going to discriminate to fix previous discrimination, we got to be more clear about what that looks like when we say we're going to do that.
So I want to use Taylor's analogy, and I want to build off that a little bit because I thought that was it's a good analogy to kind of get the idea around here's what we're talking about on there, and where I do think is appropriate to apply the right dosage of that discriminatory love. And I think it's, if we're talking about in terms of the race, well, do we provide that change when it's race time and either like hobble a few of the white kids so that they can't run as fast? Do we, and I'd say no, that's not the right answer.
Yeah.
Do we make a giant, start the black kid like halfway down so he has less play? Well, no, I think it's like, why are we doing this when it's time to judge, when it's time for action? How about you get a Gatorade passed to the kid who's having a hard time of whatever color, say, hey, what's going on? What's the need? You need
Orange
some
Gatorade.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, and see what are the needs, how can I help you, and just get on someone's level, provide dignity, and see what are you trying to do. Oh, you don't even like racing.
I love that. Yeah.
How about basketball? How about
like golf?
Yeah. Really?
We're extending the metaphor.
Yeah.
The example is basketball.
I know.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
That's a hard one, man.
I think it's just because it's so generalized. When we live in a society where things are so vastly different and specific on the situation, when you have a statement like that and you apply it across the board, there's bound to be places where it's not going to fit right. So I think going into it with this broad philosophical statement is not a good way to go.
And did he get into any details on that part? Like how he sees that being addressed? I don't remember.
Through action was a lot what he talked about.
I know he addressed it. I don't remember exactly what he said.
Yeah.
Because I'll give you an example. Like I have one of my businesses, I have 4/5 of my board is black.
Yeah.
And then 3/5 of my board is female.
Yeah.
Now that wasn't I picked the most competent people I knew.
Yes.
Just happened to be women.
Yes.
So that's what that is. But I was happy about that. I'm like, cool, we got women leading things.
Yeah.
Like that. So we can, as people who run things and manage things, we can make those decisions, right? And I do, and this is where I started to dance. It's weird. So I'm black, so I have a special affinity for black people. So when I see a young black dude, there's a part of me that's I see myself in this guy, and I want to help him. There's even more of a desire to help. If he was young, Tyler, I'd help him too. But there's a special affinity when it's my guy, right?
Yeah.
And so. So I do think one of the ways you address some of this is you don't have to make businesses hire black people all the time. One of the best ways to do it, I think, is making more black people own businesses and they can hire more black people.
Yes.
There's an inherent problem to me when you have to beg someone to let you get a seat at the table. Give him my own table. I'll go to the forest with Chuck. I'll cut down a table.
We'll do this.
Cut down a tree, and I will make my own table. If you don't want me at your table, I'm not coming to your freaking table. Just move out of the way when I'm getting my own table.
Yeah.
So I'm all about empowering black people to not be in a position where you have to ask people for permission to be around them. You don't want me around you, it's fine. We'll go do our own thing. It'll be better than your thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I do like the idea, instead of opening up spots at the table, whoever's hosting the table, making them an anti-racist, and then seeing where that goes, and watching him invite other people to the table. I worry about the idea making your own table, because then we have a bunch of different separate tables, and that's
in love. It's my own table in love.
Of course.
I don't want to sit with you.
Of course.
I just want to
You can come hang out. I have white people on my staff. I work with white people. It's all good.
So
Just have a special affinity for.
Of course, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, we can wrestle with what to do. I think
a part of it is just recognizing it, naming it, and then even starting to take action into that. He talked about
Absolutely.
percentage of home ownerships.
Yeah.
He talked about access to education. I think of okay, you talked about basketball. Percentage of NBA owners.
I do want to say something. Oh my God.
Yeah.
They're doing the Kaepernick thing, and they're like, well, they won't let him play, da da da. And I'm going, in my mind, I'm like, you didn't see the bigger problem.
Yeah.
Why are you having to ask white people to let you play sports that are dominated by black people? Why are there not more black owners? Like, that's the conversation you should have.
Exactly.
We shouldn't even have to talk about whether or not that part's racist. And half the stuff you just listed about not education, but like home ownership, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that, like, we just got to make a thing that black people, we find a way to make that more accessible. We need to I do believe there should be programs that facilitate the rehab that we didn't get post-slavery.
Yes.
There are reasonable ways to do it. We spend a lot of government money on a whole lot of stuff that's stupid. We can definitely find some money to help people do that.
Sure.
That's a definite thing we should be doing.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, that's for another episode, though.
Yeah, let's get some more episodes.
All right,
Part
hey, so
two.
we'll wrap there. We're just getting started.
Oh.
Well, thank you,
I
guys.
know.
Got y'all firing now, man.
Yeah, man. I'm
Like,
in my zone now.
Take two.
Jittering.
It's a great
But we can pause it.
perspective.
I don't even know how long we've been on, so.
You're like,
All right, hey, stay tuned. We will continue this conversation and continue digging this. I feel like with the great unmasking that our country is going through, this will be a topic of discussion. And I hope it's a
Absolutely.
topic of
Yeah, I
discussion
hope it keeps going.
at your table moving forward. So join us. Let us know what you think. You want to join us for an episode? Come on. Be brave. Jump in. So,
Ben will be here.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Later, guys.